Here, followed by a more interactive sessions to really talk about and discuss some of the key themes around industry engagement. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our chair of the panel, who's Dr. Jeannie Tan from Heriot-Watt University. Jeannie is a research fellow at the Research Centre for Carbon Solutions, and is also a technical lead on one of IDRIC's projects as well. So welcome, Jeannie. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. So I'll be the chair for this section. So first thing, I would like to introduce the panel for this session. The first one, we have Associate Professor Lindsay-Marie Armstrong from the University of Southampton. She's a chair for the Clean Carbon University Strategy Research Group, a network of over 150 academic and industry partners driving researchers and innovation towards a decarbonized future. Experience developing and launching the Solent Industrial Cluster will bring hugely valuable insight into the panel. Thank you, Lindsay, for coming to this conference. The second, we will have Laiz. So Laiz is an electrical engineer and has international professional experience. She is currently a postdoctoral research associate in Future Energy Network at the University of Bristol. She has recently undertook a secondment with Synergis. Third, we have Cheryl Anderson. She is the head of innovation and external network for Tata Steel UK, having spent over 18 years working in the steel industry. Cheryl leads on innovation, harnessing the power of cross-functional and external collaboration, and will provide key industry insight into the panel today. Next, we'll have Kyra. Kyra Campbell is a senior lecturer at the University of Sheffield. She's also the co-founder of NanoMax. She's engaged in working towards improving EDI in manufacturing as a pathway to make it more appealing and therefore sustainable in the UK as a career. Last but not least, we have Rhys Jones, who is a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Sheffield. Recently, he has been working closely with Tata Steel and Welsh Water to decarbonize their processes. So thank you, all 5 of you, being the panels for this session. So to start the session, first thing, I have a question, not to our panel, but to all of you. Think about, on the scale of 1 to 10, so the least to the most important on the 10, how important is industry engagement or ECR engagement to you and why? So think about that. I guess you won't rate 0, right? Otherwise you won't be in this session. That's what I want to, we want to hear from the panelists today. To tell us how to collaborate or to build the relationship with the industry partners and to work with the industry so that we can have a higher impact or more impactful research work in our studies. That's what we had heard from the first session where Mercedes mentioned that international collaboration will build out a lot of impact to decarbonize our society. The next question is, how do we approach and develop the links with the industry? And how we can tailor the communication. Obviously, I don't think the industry people the academics or researcher will have very different point of view, languages, technical terms, and other things that would probably build some obstruction, I would say, or that will obstruct us from reaching the link to the industry. So can we get some of the insight from the panelists, especially from the ECR panel, like Rhys or Laiz, if we can give insight about how to tailor the communication and what are some pitfalls that ECR should be wary of when they communicate with the industry partners?
Yeah, sure. So I guess for us, my experience has been working with Tata Steel and Welsh Water. And really, they are already quite technical processes. It's the novelty where there might be a knowledge gap. So for us, really, it's been really about explaining that novelty and then sort of explaining how we would bolt it onto an existing process rather than sort of telling them how they have to change the existing process. But that's had to be two ways. So, you know, when the project I'm currently working on with Tata Steel, for example, it was kind of neutral, so our professor met with somebody at Tata. The needs were sort of mutual. You know, we wanted to demonstrate our work was useful to Tata, and Tata had a problem that potentially we could help with. And that relationship just developed from there. And really, there's no one way to do it. It's just clear, consistent communication. Expectation management, I think, is key. And really then, as the process, as progress happens, I guess you just develop an understanding of how both different sides of the thing work. You know?
So the key thing is consistent communications.
Yeah.
To build up the working momentum between each sides. What kind of pitfall that you think the ECR should be wary of, or they should not be doing?
Yeah, so I mean, with regards to pitfalls, you know, when you're an academic working in a laboratory doing your own research, you know, funding deadlines aside, your timetable is broadly your own. So, you know, you can go in when the laboratory opens, you can stay there till it closes. If you encounter any problems, as long as you hit your sort of hard deadline towards the end of the research, you're okay. Whereas something I didn't really, I wouldn't say expect, but something that didn't even cross my mind is, well, actually, now that I'm going to be in industry, one of the pitfalls is it's not just my timetable. And actually, it wouldn't just be Tata Steel's timetable. So if I go to sites to do some work on my reactor now, I need my Tata chaperone to agree, and also for doing any major works, we need Tata approved electrical contractors, for example, to come along and be there. So all of a sudden, it's also a quick case of showing up with your toolbox and fixing stuff. It's you need to get 3 different parties on board there at the same time, and you work into much stricter deadlines because hey, you might have 5 hours this week to do the work, otherwise it's getting pushed back.
Can we get Laiz to give us some feedback after having a secondment in the industry?
Yeah, well, related to my secondment, I'd say it's much easier when you identify an objective in common. From my experience with site agencies, they have the project with the objective of identifying impact of electric vehicles on power systems, which I could relate to my research on power system resilience in low carbon energy systems, considering the roles of different technologies. So in this case, I could see some intersection, some overlapping between the two projects, and then they were happy with my collaboration and with my inputs, and in the end, I was also happy with the contributions to my research. So, and overall, it's much easier when you have a problem that you feel somewhat interested or motivated to work in.
Okay, so after hearing what the ECR have experienced working with the industry, I mean, me and I believe all of you would like to hear what the industry representative would expect from the academic researchers in terms of like what kind of updates, what kind of expectation output from the research in the aspect or from the point of view of the industry partners. Cheryl?
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Nice to be here. So I think when we're working with academic partners, I think this picks up a really important point. The first thing we need to do is understand each other and understand each other's language. And we know our industry, but we won't know as much as you know about your area of research. So right at the beginning, who you know about anything to help us understand your world, your language, area of research you're in. The depth of knowledge you have is what we don't have. So that's something you can share with us early on. So I think early on in research, it's really helpful for you to help us understand your context and the reason for doing work and that's what's happening. And then as projects progress, I mean, I think the timetable point is also very valid. So we have lots of processes in companies, lots of reporting deadlines, lots of times we need to show impact. But I think that word is key. So what we need to understand is how is the research that you've got, how is that going to practically change the process, the product, the way we do something, the policy landscape, that kind of thing. So I think I focus on helping us understand the research, but then also land it in reality. So what's the practical implication? How are we going to, what's the path? What's the path for that research done? And I think the project that we're working on, and universities and is a great example of that. We've gone from, lab-based scale things all the way up to an industrial demonstrator on our site, in our factory. And that is what we're looking for more and more, is speed, is being able to scale up. So any insight you can bring to that, I think, helps us. We're really interested in your research and what you're doing to help us understand how we can make it practical. And along the way, all those little updates you can give us as you're progressing help us to see the progress.
Can you also tell us a little bit more how you digest all the information or the data that the ECR or the academics provide to a company, not to only Tata Steel, but kind of like the mechanism? How do you digest it? How do you help the academics to land the solution in a real setting?
There's lots of different ways in which we get information about work that's coming up. I was thinking about one of the discussion questions we were sent before the panel. So, obviously in my role looking at innovation, I read a lot, we try to understand a lot about what's happening from journals relevant to our industry. So perhaps that's one thing. I remember being, when I was an early stage researcher and I was publishing journals about welding, but the welding I was doing was relevant to the automotive industry. So it was really important that I engaged with the automotive industry on the work I was doing as much as engaging with specialists on welding. So I think one thing is to always look at where we can connect on an application basis. What's the place the research gets applied? That doesn't mean it's not important, of course, to look at academic journals as well. I published it. I looked at that myself. But in terms of understanding our process, I would just say come and talk to us. We're humans, we work in business, we love talking about what we do the same way we love hearing about your passion for your work. So please reach out and get in touch with us. Events like this are fantastic. I went to something called Material Research Exchange earlier, a couple of months ago in London. Just as they give you the idea about how we can get lots of ideas across in a short time, there was a sort of 1 hour dedicated in that conference to people giving really little pictures of their work, like 3 to 5 minutes. And in 1 hour, I learned about what all the exhibitors in the conference were there for, what they wanted, and so I could immediately see where I could help, where I might have something that I could talk about from Tata Steel that would help them connect their research. And I made a list and I went round and I met all those people. So I think that always think about what you get over in a really short time, because we want to find you, we want to find the research you're working on and make that connection. So those little pictures, little bit of information, reach out, send us an email, connect on LinkedIn, and kind of things. We're always interested to hear from you.
So we can see that the industry partners are really keen to find out what we are doing. I think we'll have a session after this one for you to practice and also to show what you can do to really bring your research, your thought to the industry people and let them understand our languages. Hopefully they will pick us up from there to create a more impactful research. I would also like to hear from Lindsay because she has she's a very experienced academics or researchers linking between the researchers, universities, and also the industry. So what do you think, what is the thing that you really need to bring out when you speak to the people working in the companies or industry, what are the thoughts they would grab from the research point of view?
Thank you. So I'm going to touch on a number of the key messages here, because it really does stem from the level of communication and actually recognizing that there is a language barrier between all of these different sectors, academia to some extent. And it's recognizing and accepting that and being open and willing to engage and knowing that sometimes you won't get an appreciation for what their priorities might be compared to what your priorities might be. Industry may have very different priorities, different challenges, different limitations, different resources available. All of that may define what the research might look like to help them. You might have large companies who have an abundance of research and might even have their own integrated research centres and may not be necessarily important for them to cover the research with academia. But then you might have SMEs, small to medium enterprises, who don't have anything really to get them. They're really at the bottom of that ladder and want to get going, and they don't have that element or ability to do research. So there's something for us, but how do we get that over to them in terms of communication and what we do? So a lot of it is being flexible and knowing that as academics, we are communicators. We are educating this next generation of who, it doesn't matter whether it's STEM or humanities, it doesn't matter what subject it is we're doing as academics, we're educating this next generation of students. So we should be able to use those skills to knowledge exchange and engage with industries and act not just in tackling research challenges that might support them at different stages and levels, but enabling communication at the same time, because we can do that. We're all, if we're academics or we're done to some extent research with PhDs, etc., we've taken a problem, we've broken it down, we've interacted with people, we've crossed sectors to some extent. So it really is building on that communication that is what's going to get that link across, and not being scared to be in a room talking to people going, I have no idea what they've just talked about, and walk away. Don't go up and say, do you know what, what can you just repeat that? I mean, I might have a PhD, but I genuinely had no idea what you just said then, and not feeling like an idiot sometimes, because actually that's what you need to do. It's knowing and recognizing that we are all talking that different language sometimes, but that's how we're going to get this going, accelerating through.
Take the challenge, accept the challenge.
I love a challenge.
And challenge it. Can we also hear from Kyra, who is also a co-founder of NanoMax? How do you bring out? How do you? I believe you have created the knowledge in a university setting. How do you bring the knowledge out? How do you advertise them? How do you speak to the companies or industries? Can you share your experience about like knowledge exchange and building the connection with the industry people?
Sure, of course. So one of the things that you've heard, sort of the same themes, right, is about communication. And I think one of the issues is about understanding each side and what a company or an industry wants to know, what challenges they have, where their priorities lie. And I think that in a research lab, those priorities, if treated independently, would potentially be a mismatch, often because there's maybe not necessarily the desire, the understanding is not always wanted to the same degree that an academic might poke at it for many, many years, if not decades. And so one of the challenges is at the outset is, if you're going ahead in terms of collaboration, is defining the parameters so that everybody's on board. But one of the things that's also been said, right, is there's knowledge sharing opportunity and building the value and understanding that we take the time to develop in academia, and there isn't always time in industry. And I think that's a way in which you can share from that direction, where you can provide this additional knowledge that can enhance. And that only happens as you start to trust one another. And then there's of course, the flip side, right, that from industry, the more they engage with you and trust you, right, you begin to understand more nuances about the problem, and you begin to be able to work as a team. And I think that's sort of where you're always trying to end up. So I think the challenge becomes that in these relationships, you have to always remember that there's another side with different goals and values, and setting those out. And so that's sort of how I tend to approach it. I like fundamental science, but I like to understand how it's going to be applied. And so for me, I think that that kind of almost is a model for me in terms of how I tackle research problems. And if I'm able to convey that to industry successfully, which means delivering potentially an answer, but also an understanding for why that answer exists, then I think most of the time, actually, we've all learned a lot and gained a lot from that type of sort of synergy that's happened, because most of the time you can't do it without the two sides. So I guess that's what I would say in general. I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but the other thing I guess I would point out is that every relationship is unique and different, and you have to take time to build that level of trust. So I don't expect that a new engagement will immediately turn into a project, and I always try to build projects very, very slowly with very small sort of things, bringing things to the table, because I want to get to a point where we really understand each other. So if we're undertaking a really big program, we already have that foundation. It is a foundation very much of trust, so that we have the ability to kind of push forward. And so that would be the only other comment I would make about engaging on both directions, is about starting small so that you're building up. You have to think of these as a long game kind of thing, not a short game.
So you mentioned about understanding each other for both sides. So how do you find the other side of your site? Do you go through publications, or what kind of magazines, or what kind of knowledge disseminations that you found to build out this kind of understanding?
I think, to be honest, talking is probably the number one, but it's also going out of your way. So a site visit, it sounds really sort of silly, but spending 2 days with your potential industry partner on their site, looking at their equipment, talking to people of all sorts of levels with all sorts of roles, actually often illuminates more about their business, their technological challenges, that you don't get if you sort of sit in a room for an hour hashing out what you want to do. And so it's a level of investment, I think, from an academic perspective. I don't want to speak for how industry feels about it, but there is an investment. You have to decide, you want to invest in their problem and gaining the knowledge to help solve it. And I really enjoy that exploratory process. And so for me, I don't find it, I don't want to call it a nuisance, but I'm sure there are people who might say that. I really enjoy that, because for me, that really brings to life some of the issues, and often that's where I start to come up with creative solutions, and I start thinking outside the box. But it is about that. You just have to get stuck in, genuinely stuck in, and remembering that there are people in industry who may not have an advanced degree, they may have no degree, but it's absolutely irrelevant. They often have so much information that you can gain from talking to them, and often they're the people who entirely understand what you're doing and the value of it, but you have to take the time to make sure you're not talking over them or at them. You're having a mutual conversation, which is longer and harder, but it's better for everybody in the long run. It's a really, really rewarding thing to do, but it is about the long game. It's about trying to solve hard problems through using mutual knowledge.
Thank you, Kyra. I think that will give us a lot of insight and understanding how to build a relationship. And obviously, it takes time to build up this kind of skills, I would say. Apart from your research skill, this is the soft skill that we need to develop throughout our career. I would also like to hear the experience from Laiz, because Laiz just took out the secondment. Do you find that advantage to build out this kind of soft skill in terms of your career development?
Absolutely. Yeah, it helped me to have a broader view of their business, but also of the sector, of relevant problems, and of problems that are not directly related to my research at the moment, but that are related to the context, to the big picture. So to this extent, this collaboration with SciGenesis will surely continue over the next few years. We are still in contact with the preparation of some the follow-up documents of that project, and also it's really great. Apart from this, it's really great to have somebody to talk to clarify questions from an industry perspective, and not just for academic papers, among other things.
So that will create a lot of impact to your research, and hopefully that will be beneficial to the industry partners as well. So with UKRI recognizing that there is a need to readdress the academic currency, in particular looking at the impact of the research for the wider world, what do you think this means to the industry engagement, or sorry, the industry research engagement in the future? So I was thinking, can any one of you give or share your experience about industry research engagement, or you will foresee what kind of future engagement that will be from both sides?
So yeah, it's kind of turbocharged our research a little bit actually. So in terms of going for research money and so on, or maybe UKRI projects, then it really does help actually have an industrial partner in the room with you, moving towards the same goal. So we had this quite recently where one of our industrial partners was sat in on a sort of pre-application meeting we had, and it was incredibly helpful because, you know, we're no longer just academics screaming into the void at each other about our little bit of research. And one of my colleagues once said doing a PhD is moving more and more, or less and less. And sometimes it could feel like that when you're in the lab by yourself with your colleagues. But once you sort of cross that line and you start developing relationships with industry, it almost like legitimizes your work to a wider audience. So actually now, like, and that can include funders and so on. And even though if I talk to like my family about my work and I say, hey, we've got a bioreactor down at Tata Steel in Port Talbot, or at a sewage treatment facility in Hereford, all of a sudden, like, my mates know what I'm on about, and it's no longer this abstract thing. So this we sort of turbocharge this, and I think to make research and development more appealing to a wider audience, yeah, we definitely find that input and that, I guess, dose of reality from the industry helpful. It makes things less abstract to people.
Can we share?
Yeah, thanks. So I think, I mean, I'm a big fan of industry, academic engagements and research, and we've had some fantastic experience with that. And seeing that grow now is really exciting, because I think what universities bring is that space to do the thinking that we don't have time to do always. But they still also create a place where we can discuss that. So we'll give you an example of that. When we first started looking at open innovation in the company, we said, we want to work with the company on research. How are we going to do that? How are we going to find them? And we put up a website, our open innovation portal, and said, if you've got something you think could be relevant to us, please get in touch. It was great, so people got in touch. And one of them was a small construction company that had a technology for modular construction. What's great about this is this technology, it can help us to build buildings faster. That also means that at the end of their life, we can take them apart and reuse the parts. So if we think about the circular economy as a technology that could really help us do that in practice. But it hadn't been tested in lots of different places. Luckily, we were working with Specific in Swansea University. They were looking to create a demonstrator building. So we put 2 and 2 together, and we managed to get this technology into the building. They were looking for a modular technology. The building's got it's called the Active Classroom in South Wales. The idea is that buildings are power stations, buildings that can make their own energy. So if you want to look it up on the website, you can see all the energy readings and all the energy that's being generated and how it's being used. And that's led on now to more development. And earlier this year at Grand Designs, which is this big exhibition for the kinds of building technology, we launched a product with this company that got in touch via our portal. Without university engagement in that way, I think. So the value that universities bring to industrial developments, right with future products as well as in their processes, is huge. So I think it's only exciting to see people encouraged.
Lindsay, do you want to add on?
Yeah, I can. So from my research perspective, when I'm not dealing with clusters, I do research modelling. So I develop with a couple of my students. I've got Sam here, and I've got a couple of postdocs floating around the place as well. But we developed various models that can do scale up, reactive systems, a lot of catalyst systems, anything, it doesn't matter which ones, what kind of systems, fluidized beds, anything that's kind of chemical reactors. And to have that interaction with industry means that we could get our students working on various different systems, not just using purified feedstocks that we could put through these systems. We should actually say, okay, give me some actual contaminants that you have in your system, because then we can stick them through our system with the different catalysts and see what happens to them. Because we might be dealing with something in a lab that's about this big, they're dealing with something which is bigger than this room, but we can already sort of say straight away, okay, we can see at this scale something's going on and the catalysts aren't going to last very long. So we can then tell them that and help to support them with what do we need to do to make the process more efficient. And it's not just, I mean, we can get papers where we show what we're doing, but we create impact if you get that information from industry to show how it applies in the real world. And I think UKRI recognises that, so you mentioned UKRI, because when we submit our funding proposals, and for those of you who will be going on to do academic careers, I'm conscious many of you might go off into industry as well, but when you go on to do that, you will be writing funding bids. And as someone who reviews funding bids, it's very obvious, co-creation really stands out. And that co-creation means working with academics across different fields, but also academic with industry. So you could submit a bid and here's a letter of support hooked on the side. That says something, but here is a proposal where actually there's a work package where we're getting this and that and that and this from the industry, and we're going to, that makes sense, a much bigger message and will increase your chances. So realism from an academic point of view is we are also a business in the sense that we need to also get money and to do our research. It's the thing we love to do. So UKRI are recognising how important that link is with industry, because it's not just pumping out papers as well, it is that creation of impact. And and co-creation is critical to that.
Great. I wanted just to add one thing. The things that have been said are absolutely fantastic. But if we're going to talk about the relationship and the synergy between academia and industry, particularly in the context of this event, which is about sustainability, net zero, circular economy, we're not just looking at incremental adaptations of existing manufacturing processes, technologies, etc. We're looking for paradigm shift, we're looking for transformation, we're looking for all of those buzzwords, but the reality is we're looking for those. And the challenge is that a lot of times in industry, that's just not feasible. And the reasons for it not being feasible can be discussed elsewhere, but it is a reality. And in academia, we still have a home for that kind of innovation. And so that is a case where it's very high risk, but very high reward work. And whilst there would be a different environment, we could debate whether or not that's funded adequately. That is a really important relationship in terms of moving these really important targets, meeting these targets, because we are going to need that level of innovation, and that is something that academia and research labs can uniquely provide. So I think that's important to put on into the sort of sphere of comments that we're making.
Great, thank you very much. So Lindsay mentioned about co-creation. Can we get some experience or question from the audience to the panelists? Open questions?
Hi, my name is Chris from the University of Manchester. I think the panel's given lots of helpful tips for what to do when we're already in the room, so when we started building that relationship, when we started talking. But how can we as early careers researchers get those contacts that aren't just given to us by our PIs or by our supervisors? Is there any advice the panel can give about like how as academics they started those applications, or how as industry they prefer to be contacted, or like how they prefer to start those relationships going?
come to events like the UKCCSRC, like IDRIC, like your own clusters. I say those two because I'm very affiliated with those two. All the others are just as important for your own research. Though the number of links the most of the links I've made have been going to networking events that are targeting academia, industry, policymakers, social sector, bringing them together. And that was the one thing that I think COVID had that hit with. You can sit there and watch us talk, and we can talk and talk and talk, but actually we could have a conversation later and you'll probably get more golden nuggets from us having a conversation over coffee than us telling you stuff in answer to one question that's just been answered, because it is that interaction. And you only get that in these networking events. And then you've got the tools like LinkedIn, and then you've got all of these other opportunities, because as we've sort of mentioned, industry is looking for answers to some extent to something that they've got a challenge for. So go, inquire, and build your research yourself, because if you want to be an academic, you have to demonstrate independence as well. So certainly don't just rely on your supervisor's links. Proactively build it, build your networks, and then you've got your pillars to work with.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's absolutely right. I was mentioning earlier the short pitches and the event I went to earlier this year, and I quickly managed to go down and make a load of contacts because of the short pitches that I heard. I'd also say, if you're trying to get involved in a particular industry or company, do look out for people with job titles like innovation or collaboration in them, because these people, their role is to connect. It's like my role is to connect. I'm here trying to find people to connect with. So people like us, we're waiting for people to get in touch, and I regularly get people get in touch on LinkedIn and say, I've got this piece of work, can I send you something? We're always willing to have like a 20-minute, 30-minute conversation just to get something started. So I think look out for those people that are in those roles. More and more companies are having them now, and they have that role because open innovation has been growing over the last at least 10 years, I would say. More people are trying to find those external connections. So there's always something I think out there who's got that kind of role. Maybe finding them. And if the first person you reach in a company isn't the right connection, don't give up on that company, don't give up on that industry. There'll be somebody else there who will understand and want to fight and what you've got to talk about.
Great. Any more questions?
Hi, it's Matthew Wilkes. I'm a researcher at the University of Sheffield. So once you have an industrial partnership and generating industrially focused research, how do you ensure that work is taken forward? How do you ensure that there is a tangible outcome to the hard work and time that you put in to do that research?
Thanks, yeah. So I guess for us it was a question of getting the research ready for industry first. So I started my research about 10 years ago, but the practicalities of it were always geared towards being industrially applicable. That was a big thing. So, for example, in fermentation processes, the literature, you see a lot of things like single culture fermentations and those things. If you've got contaminants flying about, probably aren't going to be as applicable for industry as mixed cultures and so on. So there's that end of it. It's trying to, first of all, make the research sort of realistic towards the industry, and that's where you start. In terms of continuation then, I don't think that's so much of an issue, because once you've got the point where industry's interested, you sort of demonstrating your usefulness, and then, especially what I've seen with our work, is that it's probably not as efficient as it can be once we get it on the site and we get it installed. But there are so many efficiency gains we make after that point, and that's where the follow-on will be. It's that the continual improvement of the process and the efficiency gains. And then that would lead eventually these paradigm shifts that you talk about. So we will actually know that is the right way to do this, and we can just keep making improvements to it.
Anyone who wants to add on?
So the other thing I might mention is most companies will have some kind of business process around how they make investments. And so if you're interested in something growing and being applied in industry, it's always okay to ask the question, how does that work? You know, what does it look like where you work? What's the process? You know, we have a capital investment process, a capex process. If we want to invest in new kit, it has to go through that process. So you can always find that out. And then if you can help to build cases, understand the economics of the investment, for example, then you can help to land that investment in the practical reality of the industry. That's something you can do that can help us to take things forward. So it's always ask. It's always okay to, for us to share those things and explain our works.
Proactive is the key, I would say. Do we still have time for one more question?
Thank you. I'm Jeannie from Sheffield University. I'm a third-year PhD, so I'm going to ask a very silly question, maybe, but very specific, if you don't mind. I'm very happy to know the industry will be happy to know our research and very happy to communicate with us. But I don't have any experience on that. My question is, what the industry world would happy to hear from us for the first content, for example, for the first email. What should I mention in the first email? Should I mention a long email about my research, or just a little to explain what I would like to communicate with you, or what type of the content?
Anyone?
Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer. I would suggest try to network with them, like an event such as this conference, for instance, or other events, to get them interested, to get them know your research and yourself. And from this, we can start building collaborations.
Also, don't start something saying it's a silly question, because there's never a silly question. So I would also sort of add to that, just keep it short and simple in the first instance. If you have met them somewhere, they've probably got a flavour of who you are. If you are sending them an email straight out, you can say, hi, I am Google, and I am doing this particular work. I'm interested in having a quick conversation with you as to what your priorities are and whether there's anything we can do to get a discussion going in terms of research. Just short and sweet to get it going. If they're interested, they're interested. Sometimes industries just don't even get to the second paragraph if you've got far too long. Just short and sweet, right at the top.
Cheryl Anderson?
Perhaps one other thing I can mention is there's been a lot of chat about different goals that we have in different areas that we work, whether it's industry or academia. If you have a way of when you look at a company you're trying to approach, think about those bigger goals. They're probably on their website, honestly. Our goals are on our website, we talk about those things. And if you can connect somehow what you're doing to that, start with the impact. There's some training, and I saw this little video by someone called Simon Sinek who talks about start with why. Talk about your impact first, talk about why you're doing what you're doing first, and then get to the specifics of it, if that's how you want to communicate. So, if you've got a way of connecting, always take a quick look at the website, see what the company's working on. We'll be publishing things, companies will be publishing what they're working on, what their interests are. There's always a press section, and they're talking about the latest things that they've been doing. If you've got a way of connecting to some of that, can help making a connection, even if your research is brand new and they've not been involved in that area before. If you can make a connection to one of those bigger goals, it's sometimes an easier to a conversation.
I think that's the answer for our next session, to work out how to approach the industry partners or people. We'll have a short discussion and kind of like a short pitch that will let you practice and learn how to approach the industry people. And then we will, hopefully the panelists can tell you what are the things you should do and what are the things you should not do in the next session. So next we'll pass back to Charlotte. Just before Charlotte, I would like to thank all the panels for sharing your experience, and hopefully you still have time to engage with them later on. So make use of this opportunity, and hopefully you learn the soft skill. Thank you.